The landscape of giants. Look at the skylines of modern London, Cologne, or Rome today, and you see the apex of human engineering. You see cities of glass, steel, and continuous, unbroken progress. The millions of people navigating these streets assume that their cities have always been centers of the world, that civilization is a straight line marching upward from the past to the present. But if you were dropped into these exact locations in the 8th or 9th century, you would find yourself in a post-apocalyptic world. Between the years 700 and 1100 AD, the people of early medieval Europe did not live in a world of continuous progress. They lived in the graveyard of a forgotten superpower. They were surrounded by colossal stone monuments, sweeping arches, and impenetrable walls that they did not know how to build, and in many cases, did not understand. To the medieval mind, these ruins were not quaint archaeological sites. They were the terrifying, awe-inspiring work of giants. Today, we are going to explore the psychological and physical reality of the Dark Ages. We will walk the shattered streets of early medieval Rome, London, and Cologne to uncover exactly how the people of this era perceived the colossal Roman ruins around them, how they repurposed the bones of antiquity for their own survival, and how they built the foundations of the modern world inside the skeleton of an empire they could barely comprehend. The geography of the ghost's urban layout. To understand how medieval people lived among Roman ruins, you must first understand the sheer, terrifying scale of the emptiness. The defining feature of the early medieval urban layout was a profound demographic collapse. In the year 200 AD, Rome held over 1 million people. By the year 800 AD, it held perhaps 30,000. Yet, the massive, defensive Aurelian walls still stood, enclosing an area designed for a population 30 times larger. This created a phenomenon the Italians called the disabitato, the uninhabited zone. A medieval citizen of Rome could walk for hours inside the city gates and see nothing but wild forests, malarial swamps, and vineyards, all punctuated by the decaying, mountainous hulks of imperial bathhouses and palaces. The surviving population huddled in a small, dense cluster on the low-lying Campus Martius, near the Tiber River, abandoning the famous 7 hills to nature and wild dogs. In Northern Europe, the reaction to the ruins was often outright avoidance. When the Anglo-Saxons arrived in Britain, they looked at the massive, walled Roman city of Londinium and chose not to live inside it. For centuries, the walled city sat completely abandoned, a ghost town of crumbling stone and glass. The Anglo-Saxons instead built a sprawling, messy, timber and thatch trading settlement a mile to the west, called Londonwick. They avoided the Roman walls not just out of convenience, but out of profound psychological unease. The rigid, mathematical grid of the Roman streets was entirely alien to the organic, localized, village-based mindset of the early medieval world. To them, the ruined cities were places of the dead, best left to the elements and the shadows. The work of giant psychology and perception. How did the medieval mind rationalize these impossible structures? We must remember that between 700 and 1000 AD, the technological capacity of Northern Europe had suffered a catastrophic regression. The Romans had built with opus caementitium highly advanced volcanic concrete and utilized massive, perfectly dressed blocks of stone raised by complex cranes. The Anglo-Saxons, Franks, and early Normans built primarily in timber, earth, and wattle, and daub. When a society that builds in wood encounters a 150-foot-tall concrete dome, they do not see engineering. They see magic. We know exactly what they thought, because they wrote it down. In the 8th century, an anonymous Anglo-Saxon poet looked upon the Roman ruins of Britain, likely the Bath complex at Aquae Sulis, modern-day Bath, and composed a haunting elegy known today as The Ruin. He wrote, "Earthlik is es wellstan, word Jeberkon, enta juurk idla. Wondrous is this wall stone, broken by fate. The work of giants decays, enta juurk." The work of giants, because the early medieval people could not fathom that ordinary humans had cut, lifted, and perfectly fitted these massive stones. They genuinely believed the ruins were the remnants of an ancient race of giants or demons who had been destroyed by God's wrath. They looked at the advanced Roman hypocausts, the underfloor heating systems that utilized hollow brick channels to pump hot air through homes, and, not understanding the physics of the furnace, they believed these subterranean tunnels were the lairs of dragons or the physical gateways to hell. The ruins inspired a deep, pervasive melancholia. They were a constant, towering reminder that humanity had fallen from a higher state of grace, and that the end of the world was likely approaching. The ultimate quarry architecture and spolia. But dread is a luxury that starving people cannot afford. While the ruins inspired awe, they also offered the single greatest economic resource in the medieval world. The Roman Empire became a quarry. The architectural reality of this era is defined by the concept of spolia, the systematic repurposing of ancient building materials. Mining new stone was incredibly labor-intensive and expensive. Why quarry fresh limestone when millions of tons of perfectly cut masonry were simply sitting abandoned in the center of your city? The destruction was utilitarian and brutal. The beautiful, polished marble columns and statues of antiquity were not viewed as art. They were viewed as raw chemical ingredients. Marble is primarily calcium carbonate. Medieval laborers systematically smashed classical statues and burned them in massive lime kilns to produce quicklime, the essential ingredient for medieval mortar. The physical art history of the Roman Empire was literally burned to hold medieval walls together. When new, monumental architecture was attempted, the rulers engaged in high-status scavenging. When the Frankish king Charlemagne built his magnificent Palatine Chapel at Aachen around 800 AD, he wanted to project imperial authority. Because his own craftsmen could not carve such perfect columns, he ordered massive, ancient marble and porphyry columns to be physically ripped from the ruins of Rome and Ravenna, loaded onto carts, and dragged hundreds of miles across the Alps to be inserted into his new church. In the medieval world, you did not build a new empire. You scavenged the corpse of the old one. Exorcising the stone's religion and the sacred. The most profound tension between the medieval present and the Roman past occurred in the realm of religion. The medieval world was strictly, absolutely Christian. The ruins they lived among were overwhelmingly, aggressively pagan. Every triumphal arch, every temple, and every monument was dedicated to Jupiter, Mars, or deified emperors. To the medieval clergy, these were not just historical buildings. They were spiritually contaminated. They were the physical dwelling places of demons. In the year 601 AD, Pope Gregory the Great sent a profound directive to Abbot Mellitus, a missionary traveling to Britain. Gregory realized that destroying every Roman pagan temple was physically impossible and politically unwise. Instead, he wrote, "The temples of the idols in that nation ought not to be destroyed. Let holy water be made and sprinkled in the said temples. Let altars be erected and relics placed. For if those temples are well built, it is requisite that they be converted from the worship of devils to the service of the true God." This policy of spiritual sanitization saved the greatest architectural wonders of the ancient world. The Pantheon in Rome only survives today because in 609 AD, it was formally gifted to the Pope and consecrated as the Church of Santa Maria ad Martyrs. The bones of thousands of unnamed Christian martyrs were dragged from the catacombs and buried under the floor, physically overpowering the demons of the pagan past. In Cologne, the towering medieval church of St. Gerion was built directly upon the foundation of a colossal, oval-shaped Roman structure, likely a martyr's shrine or an imperial reception hall. The medieval architects did not tear it down. They used the indestructible Roman foundation as the literal bedrock of their faith, blending the architectural perfection of the Roman past with the theological certainty of the medieval present. Fortresses of the new elite politics and defense. In a world defined by the collapse of central authority, politics became highly localized and brutally violent. Power belonged to whoever could protect the population from Viking, Saracen, or rival feudal raids. And nothing offered better protection than Roman engineering. The medieval elite's warlords, dukes, and bishops violently competed to claim the most defensible ruins. Ancient amphitheaters and theaters were the ultimate prizes. Because they were built as massive, enclosed rings of impenetrable stone, they required very little modification to become impregnable castles. In Rome, The powerful Frangipani family seized the Colosseum and the Arch of Titus, fortifying them into a massive, private urban fortress. Rival families seized the theater of Marcellus and the mausoleum of Hadrian, which was transformed into the towering Castel Sant'Angelo. The ancient monuments were no longer public works. They were weaponized strongholds used to dominate the starving population below. In northern Europe, the surviving Roman city walls were the difference between life and death. During the terrifying Viking invasions of the 9th century, the Anglo-Saxons realized that their sprawling, unfortified timber settlements were indefensible. King Alfred the Great made a strategic, world-altering decision. He abandoned the timber settlement of Londinium and ordered his people to move back inside the haunted, ruined walls of Roman Londinium. They could not build walls like the Romans, but they could repair them. They cleared the rubble, dug new defensive ditches, and established a fortified garrison town known as Londonburg. The ghost city was resurrected solely because its ancient Roman skeleton provided the ultimate shield against the axes of the Danes, severed Arteries' infrastructure and economy. While the walls survived to offer protection, the highly complex infrastructure that made Roman urban life possible had completely failed. The Roman Empire was a machine powered by moving water and smooth roads. In the medieval era, those arteries were severed. During the siege of Rome in 537 AD, the Ostrogoths deliberately smashed the aqueducts outside the city to cut off the water supply. They were never fully repaired. Without the aqueducts, the massive public baths became useless, echoing caverns. The medieval Romans were forced to return to the practices of their prehistoric ancestors. They clustered around the Tiber River, drinking directly from its muddy, polluted waters, and sinking wells deep into the ruins to tap the groundwater. The famous Roman road network, which once allowed armies and merchants to travel from Scotland to Syria on paved stone, suffered a similar fate. Because there was no central imperial tax system to fund road crews, the roads fell into total disrepair. Paving stones were scavenged for local building projects. Forests overgrew the highways. Because land travel became slow, dangerous, and incredibly expensive, the economy of medieval Europe pivoted entirely to the rivers. The River Thames in London, the Rhine in Cologne, and the Tiber in Rome became the new superhighways. The global, monetized economy of the Romans, where a citizen in Britain could eat grain from Egypt off a plate made in Gaul, was dead. The medieval economy was hyper-local, based on barter, raw materials, and regional river trade. Frisian merchants sailed the Rhine, exchanging local timber and slaves for Frankish swords. The grand, paved imperial forums where the world once traded were now buried under 6 feet of mud, functioning merely as convenient, flat pastures to graze sheep before slaughter, the foundation of the modern world. Today, the timber huts, the lime kilns, and the terrified peasants of the Dark Ages are gone. The Roman ruins that survived their scavenging have been cleaned, stabilized, and put behind velvet ropes for tourists to photograph. It is easy to look back at the people of 800 AD and dismiss them as ignorant, living like scavengers in the shadow of a superior civilization. But this is a profound misunderstanding of human resilience. The people of the early medieval world were not merely squatters. They were survivors of a geopolitical apocalypse. They inherited a landscape built for a global empire that no longer existed, and they pragmatically adapted it to a brutal, localized reality. They did not understand the chemistry of Roman concrete, but they understood that burning a marble emperor could hold their own homes together. They did not understand the logistics of the Roman legions, but they knew that the crumbling walls of Londinium could stop a Viking army. They took the terrifying, alien work of giants and forcefully bent it to their own will. When you walk through Rome, London, or Cologne today, the modern world you see does not rest solely on the genius of the Roman Empire. It rests on the desperate, brilliant, and ruthless survival of the medieval men and women who lived among the ghosts, and who used the shattered bones of antiquity to slowly, painfully, build the world we live in today.